Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten 774 here, bringing you my review of the 6th mystery in the Nancy Drew series, Nancy Drew: The Secret of the Scarlet Hand. So, as usual, my reviews are based off of 5 separate categories, each of which is scored on a scale of 1 to 10. Those categories are plot, characters, setting and design, entertainment and gameplay value, and music and vibe. The score for each of those 5 categories is added up for a total possible score of 50, and each game receives a final score and a final letter grade. So let's get to it. The plot of Secret of the Scarlet Hand. So this is one of several mysteries where Nancy goes to a location for a completely normal purpose and ends up with a mystery falling into her lap. So the normal purpose, Nancy has been hired for an internship at Beach Hill Museum in Washington, D.C., and this is a museum that specializes in Maya culture. So Nancy goes there expecting a normal internship. She's supposed to help out at the museum. The museum has recently acquired a monolith, a Maya monolith, that is going to be kind of their feature, and the museum is preparing to open up to present this monolith to the public. They have a bunch of other Mayan artifacts as well that Nancy is also going to be responsible for. She is responsible for interacting with several of the museum employees, and that's basically what she's supposed to do. But then, snafu, all of a sudden, one of the museum's prized artifacts, the Pakal carving, a carving of King Pakal, a famous Maya king, is stolen. And there is a mysterious red handprint left in its place, and mysterious glyphs written on this piece of paper with the handprint. And so, naturally, Nancy decides to solve the mystery, and the board of directors for Beach Hill Museum asks her to solve the mystery. So as far as plots go, this one is solid. It's relatively simple. You kind of have to get past the fact that Nancy always ends up like going on vacation or having a job, and then it turns into something completely different. It turns into a mystery for her, which is fine. We can accept that. However, the plot unfortunately isn't terribly exciting in the respect that a lot of the plot involves Nancy doing chores for the museum or just doing a lot of research and learning about Maya culture, which is cool because this is easily, or at least I consider it to be easily, the most educational game in the Nancy Drew series. You learn a lot about Maya culture. You can tell that the developers really did their research when they were making this game, and it makes sense that you're going to be learning a lot when you're in a museum, but it almost takes over. It kind of overwhelms the plot because that's what you end up doing for so much of it that it becomes a little bit less exciting. It's still a solid plot. There's very few issues that I have with actual like plot holes and actual storyline and development. It's not as exciting as it probably could be, especially they could probably have played up the red handprint a little bit more, made it a little more creepy, made it a little more eerie. They don't necessarily, but the fact that it's there is cool, and what they do with the plot is interesting. However, overall, I give the plot of Secret of the Scarlet Hand a 7 out of 10. So now let's move on to our characters. There are, I believe, 4 physical characters in the game. We have Joanna Riggs, who is kind of the director of the museum. She is running the show. The curator. Yeah, the curator for the museum. So Nancy reports to Joanna a lot and gets a lot of instructions from Joanna. There is Henrik Vanderheun, who is at the museum. He is responsible for translating the glyphs on the monolith. He's just kind of a glyph expert. So he's basically a researcher and a translator at the museum. We have Taylor Sinclair, who is an art dealer who helps the museum acquire a lot of their pieces. And we have Alejandro Del Rio, who works at the Mexican consulate and is kind of the go-between for the museum and Mexico as a country, because a lot of the basically all of the artifacts that they're getting for the museum come originally from Mexico. There are several phone characters as well in the game. We actually spend a lot of time on the phone, which is probably one of the things that makes character interaction not my favorite in this game is that there are so many phone calls. I feel like we spend half the game making phone calls sometimes, which just isn't terribly exciting. I'd much rather converse with somebody that's physically there. I understand the need for phone calls every once in a while, but there were just a lot of them. Otherwise, the characters that are physically present are very dynamic. They're all very different from one another. They all have very different personalities, so interacting with them is fun. There's also kind of some tension between all of the characters, so every once in a while you'll get a little bit of gossip and you'll get a little bit of hate from some characters towards others, which is always interesting. It adds to the depth of the plot, certainly. I do wish that we could go more in depth with some of the characters. We do with, we get a little bit more information about Henrik, we get a little bit more information about Taylor, but I really would have loved some more depth for Joanna and Alejandro. Just some more subplots, a little bit more information about who they are as people rather than just their jobs. So overall, the characters, they are a dynamic cast and they are very fun to interact with, but I just feel like there were opportunities missed and they could have been more interesting. So for characters, I give Secret of the Scarlet Hand a 7 out of 10. So now let's move on to setting and design, which takes into consideration the setting of the mystery and how it's incorporated into gameplay, as well as the design, the graphics, the character graphics, and the background graphics. So the setting and design for this game is really quite nice. This game takes place in Washington, D.C. We don't see anything of Washington, D.C. really, outside of the museum. We get to see a map when we're taking like buses and trains, public transportation around the city, but that's all we really get of Washington, D.C., which may have been a missed opportunity because there's a lot of really cool historic things in Washington, D.C., but at the same time, that's not really what this mystery was about, so maybe it's not that important. Either way, we're in Washington, D.C., but the majority of the mystery takes place within Beach Hill Museum in Washington, D.C. And the museum itself is really well done. I absolutely love that we can look at every single exhibit in the museum. Every single thing. There's no set dressing there. All of it is interactive. We can read about all of it. We can interact with a lot of the exhibits. One of the exhibits is actually a really cool 3-level pyramid based on the pyramids that were used in Maya culture, and you get to play these games to progress your way down through the pyramid. It's just a really cool interactive display and would be really fun to go through in an actual museum. So overall, I absolutely love Beach Hill as a location. We go to a couple other locations. We go to the Mexican consulate where Alejandro Del Rio works. We go to Taylor Sinclair's office, and we go to a hospital at one point and Nancy's hotel room. And those locations they're fine, they're serviceable, they look like any other office, but we really don't get to interact with those settings hardly at all. You just kind of go into them and talk to the characters that are in those locations. So those settings are fine. The real winner of the setting is Beach Hill Museum. And the background graphics for the whole game are beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And the character graphics are getting better as well. They're still pretty standard. It's going to be a while before the characters actually start to move in a more natural way, but by this point in the game, they do look more like real people. Overall, I'm very happy with the setting and design of this mystery, so I give it a 9 out of 10 for Secret of the Scarlet Hand. Now we go on to entertainment and gameplay value. This is really an entertaining game. You really feel immersed in the game, especially because you can interact with every exhibit in the museum. It really feels like you actually are at a museum. All of the tasks that Nancy is supposed to do feel relevant to the museum. She is asked to do quite a few puzzles and chores, but they make sense given her purpose being at the museum and the kinds of things that would need to be done there. Like she assembles a pot at one point. She reorganizes the sound bites for exhibits. She reorganizes a numbering display. So the things that she's testing out exhibits. I mean, she's doing things that make sense. There are a lot of them. There maybe could have been slightly fewer of them, but they are they're relevant, which is good. It's much better than having puzzles that are randomly just thrown in for the sake of having puzzles. These puzzles are actually important to the mystery, which is good. Gameplay itself, it's really fun. You have a nice mix of exploring locations, a nice mix of interacting with characters, a nice mix of just plot twists and cool things happening. Overall, it's a really entertaining game. I think the amount of puzzles might detract from it somewhat, but overall I'm quite happy with it. So I give entertainment and gameplay value a 9 out of 10 for Secret of the Scarlet Hand. And finally, we have music and vibe. The music of this game fits the game perfectly. It's all of the tracks sound very Mayan. I mean, I guess I have no idea what that would actually sound like, but because I've played this game, I feel like I do. The music just seems to fit perfectly within the case, and it really does add to the feel of the game when you're walking around the museum and you have this really cool music in the background. It really adds to the atmosphere, and it really pumps up the vibe. I feel like the game could have felt very dry and very boring, but the music really helps bring up the vibe. The vibe is also enhanced by just the nature sounds that you get when you're walking in the garden. There's little kind of just creepy moments when you're walking around, because it's an empty museum. There's only, at one point, there's 3 other people in the museum. Sometimes there's only Nancy, so it's kind of a cool space. It's not a scary game by any means. There are a couple surprising moments, but nothing that's going to freak you out. But they do a nice job of making the vibe still interesting. It's not the most interesting vibe in the series, which is why I can't give it a perfect 10, but I do think that they do a really nice job with it. So I give music and vibe a 9 out of 10 for Secret of the Scarlet Hand. So finally, if we add up all of those scores, we have a 7 for plot, 7 for characters, 9 for setting and design, 9 for entertainment and gameplay value, and 9 for music and vibe, for a total score of 41 out of 50, and a final letter grade of, where'd it go? Of a B for this game, which is totally solid. Again, I grade these games against one another. So I am not grading these Nancy Drew games compared to all other games that have ever existed. I'm comparing them to each other. So a B grade means it's one of the really good games in the series. And I would absolutely say that. So if somebody were to say, hey, is this a good game? Should I play it? Absolutely, it is a really good game. It's a lot of fun. You learn a lot of really cool things about Maya culture. And besides that, it's a really important game in the Nancy Drew series as a whole. There are 3 important things that we are introduced to in Secret of the Scarlet Hand that will pop up in countless mysteries down the road. Those 3 things being Sunny June, Coco Kringles, and Krollmeister. All 3 of those are introduced in this game. So if you want to be really immersed in Nancy's universe, this game is extremely important to play. This was one of the last games that I played as I was making my way through this series, and when I played it, it just filled in so many holes for me. I was like, oh, that's Sunny June. That's where he first came up. I was kind of wondering about that. So it's a really good game, a really important, I guess, episode in the series. So I would definitely recommend it. Absolutely would recommend it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I hope to see you soon in some other walkthroughs and reviews. Thanks for watching. See you soon.